Hey guys, welcome back to more Ripe Stories. In this video, my smug neighbor cut down all trees on my newly purchased property to teach me a lesson before I could even move in. Let's dive right into the video. The first one is titled The Ultimate Payback for a Rude Neighbor. So I have this neighbor who's just the worst. Let's call him Dave. Dave has this obnoxious habit of playing his music at full blast during the late hours of the night. I've tried talking to him about it, but he just laughs it off and says it is not his fault if I cannot sleep. Super charming, right? Well, after weeks of sleepless nights and trying to be the nice neighbor, I decided enough was enough. One night I found out he had a big party planned and I knew that he would crank the music up even higher than usual. So I hatched a plan. I waited until the party was in full swing and I set up my phone to stream the loudest, most annoying sounds I could find. Think sirens, baby cries and an air horn sound effect. I connected it to my portable speaker and started blasting it at full volume right outside his window. The look on his face when he realized it was me and not the party music was priceless. He ran out to confront me, but I just smiled and said, "Sorry Dave, cannot sleep with all this noise." His friends were cracking up and he ended up having to ask his guests to leave early because he was so embarrassed. Since then, he has kept the volume down significantly. Petty? Absolutely. Satisfying? You bet. And yeah guys, let me know in the comments if you especially enjoy these petty neighbor revenge stories because I really like them. Also, if you wouldn't mind, please don't forget to like the video because that helps my channel tremendously. Now let's dive into the title story, which is titled Found Out My Entitled Neighbor Cut Down All the Trees on My New Property. So I chose my property because of the mature trees that were growing all around the property. I love nature and the quantity of oaks, maples, ash, walnut and beech intrigued me. With all of these trees around, it's also meant that I would get to enjoy regular visits from the animals that live in them, like the squirrels, chipmunks and birds. It was the perfect lot to be able to build my dream home on and I couldn't wait to be able to do so. But to start out with, I planned to park my mobile home on it, so I did not rush into any decisions. I had some plans drawn up but really wanted to enjoy the property before I decided exactly what angle I would like to have the houses set at, etc. However, in between buying the property and moving on to it, I had some other things to attend to, and given that the property was vacant other than the trees and had no buildings to tend to on it, I was not concerned with the delay. However, in hindsight, I should have realized some red flags early on when it came to my neighbor Stan. When I first started looking at the property, Stan came over to see me. "What would you want this place for?" said Stan. "It isn't very nice." Hello," I said, taken aback by this stranger approaching me and not even introducing himself to start with, but just coming over and speaking to me in that way. "To be a home, of course," I replied. "Is there something I should know about the neighborhood and why shouldn't I buy the place?" "It is ugly," said Stan. "Blocks my view." "But the trees," I said. "They make a wonderful view." "A waste of space," said Stan. "I've been trying to get the town to clear cut it for years," said Stan. "But they wouldn't." "It is not the town that owns it," I said. I knew this for a fact. The seller was a private citizen who had originally bought the property to build their own house on. However, they had not ever done it as their wife had been transferred out of the area for work and they had decided to make their own dream home there. Well, this all worked out considerably well for me as it gave me the chance to acquire it. Despite Stan's attitude, I decided to buy the property. It suited me perfectly and I thought maybe he just liked hearing himself talk. I wish I had taken his words more seriously or asked more questions about my neighbor before buying the property and leaving it unattended for a few months while I dealt with some other things. Before I moved my mobile home onto the lot, I drove up to mow the lawn and look after details like that to have everything in order. But when I got there, I was in absolute shock. All of my beautiful huge trees were gone, even the little ones had been chopped down. All that remained were the tree stumps. I was so angry and upset by this. I didn't know my neighborhood well yet, I didn't know my neighbors and had only met Stan that one time. I had known that he had hated the trees but had no way of knowing if he had gone to these lengths to get rid of them. All I knew was that all the dreams I had of having the serenity of the trees with the birds and other animals around my home were gone. And since I'd already sold my home back in the city, I would still have to live on this barren piece of property, at least in my mobile home. Maybe I could sell the land to someone else, but then where would I go and what would I do? A part of me wanted to find out where Stan lived and knock down his door to find out if he was the one who had cut down my trees. But I decided that would not do much good. He would likely deny it and then it would just be his words against my gut feeling. And I knew that in confronting him, I might do something that would get me into even more trouble. The way I was feeling, I wanted to knock his teeth out. And by the way, guys, if you would be in this situation, what would be the first thing you would do to your neighbor? Would you also become physical or would you instantly contact a lawyer? Since we are tree law veterans, we of course know that trees can have immense value, so honestly getting physical is not even worth it. It is much more worth it to sue this entitled neighbor into the ground. But anyway, instead I decided to go for a drive and try and clear my head before deciding what to do next. After driving around for a while, I passed the police station and decided to make a complaint. After all, what happened was a crime. It was not just a few branches that might have been leaning onto the neighbor's property, it was seriously every single one of my trees. Now, I would have far less privacy on my property, let alone the atmosphere and aesthetics that I'd been planning on. Seriously, I felt violated, my new home was already in shambles and I hadn't even gotten to spend one night on my own land yet. Deciding that I needed to be on my land to be able to deal with the situation and get to the bottom of what had happened, I moved my mobile home up the next day. A few days later, I still felt terrible about the situation, but in a much calmer mindset, I decided to approach Stan. There were only a few houses that could belong to him, given that he had mentioned that my trees had infringed on his view. After knocking on a few doors, I found Stan's home. But I had the chance to get to meet a few of my neighbors in the process, and I mentioned to them who I was and what had happened. I inquired if anyone knew anything, but no one seemed open to talking. I understand that since they may have feared repercussions, I was after all a stranger, and they didn't know if they could trust me. "Hello, Stan," I said, approaching him. "Would you know anything about my trees getting cut down?" "Cannot say, but I'm glad to have my view back," said Stan smugly. "View of what?" I asked. "What do you see out there that impresses you so much?" "The houses," said Stan. "Do you like the architecture?" I asked. "Not so much the houses, but the people," said Stan. That did not impress me and made me feel quite uncomfortable given that my privacy was completely gone because of my trees being cut down. There was something unsettling about the comments. Was Stan just a curious neighbor, or was he more than that? Did he just like knowing what was going on, or was it more than that? "Sorry to burst your bubble about the trees," I said, "but I will not be leaving my space open. There will either be a large privacy fence going up, or more trees will be planted." "You cannot do that," said Stan. "On my own land, I most certainly can," I replied. I headed back to my mobile home and began to prepare a meal for myself. I decided to stay inside and read a book instead of going out to enjoy the sunshine. Eventually, I would find a way to appreciate my yard, but not until I had established some privacy between my home and Stan. A few days later, Stan came over and offered me $500 for my property. "Since you said you liked the trees so much, its value probably is not worth much anymore. And this way you could afford a camping space for the season somewhere in nature." I found this as a complete insult. I paid a fair price for the land and it was in the thousands of dollars. "Do you even know what this land is worth?" I asked. "Get off my land. You just want to rub it all in my face and I'm not having anything to do with it." "Huffy, aren't we?" said Stan. "I don't want to cause any harm." "The harm has been done already," I said. "And the police know about it, so don't think that you will get away with this." "What did I do?" said Stan. "As if you don't know." "You don't belong here," said Stan. "You're a tree hugger. You should be in a neighborhood that doesn't have people in it. I've always wanted there to be a big open lot between me and the next house." "Well, then you should have bought the property for its full value and then cut down the trees," I said. "I'm the owner of this property now and I'm not going to be threatened or lowballed." That afternoon I checked in with the police. They were still investigating the situation, however, they had checked with the town and no one had taken out any permits to cut down the trees, so it was both a criminal matter in that they hadn't gotten my permission and a civil one given that the proper documents were not obtained in advance. I decided to hire a property lawyer who specialized in tree law to assist me going forward. I needed help knowing what my rights were. He explained timber trespass to me and explained that I had the potential to treble damages, which was 3 times the value of the trees due to willful destruction of my property. However, first we would have to get enough proof that it was Stan or someone else who had cut down the trees. While waiting to get enough evidence or information to blame someone, I decided to hire a certified arborist first. This way, I would have an idea of the value of my trees. I also wanted to know what it would cost me to plant more trees in the future, because there was no way that I was going to leave the land open and barren. However, depending on if I could get damages from my aggressor or not, it might mean that I would need to downgrade my housing plans to be able to have some trees on my property. The arborist assessed the trees at a high value given the replacement cost landscape value and the species of trees that I had lost. The report justified a claim of up to $200,000 if I were to get the treble damages. A few weeks went by and there was no resolution to the situation. I decided to try a new tactic and then spoke to my lawyer about it first. I was going to offer a reward for information. It could be anonymous and given to the police. Between them and my lawyer, the situation could be dealt with, and that way I would not even know who had said anything unless they were needed to testify eventually. I guess the saying that money talks is true, because it only took a few days before the police arrested Stan for criminal and civil negligence. It turned out that Stan hired someone to cut down the trees one holiday weekend when most of the neighborhood was off celebrating and there were less people to see what was happening. It took a fair amount of questioning from Stan to get him to admit to it, but with the evidence from the tree company, eventually he had to give in. He was released on bail, and I made sure not to go anywhere near his place because I didn't want to say or do anything that would have a negative impact on my lawsuit against him. My lawyer found several witnesses to talk about Stan's intent and how he had always hated the trees. The municipality was also able to attest to this fact, as Stan had asked them to cut down the trees many times. Given that Stan had admitted to what he had done, the case did not have to go to trial to be heard, but we all found ourselves in the judge's chambers during a settlement hearing. The arborist's report was given to the judge so that he could see the value of the losses. The situation was extremely disagreeable for my client, said my lawyer. This situation also created major financial consequences and uncertainties for him during the course of the investigation. The major reason that my client selected the property was for the trees and his love of nature. Without the trees, the birds, squirrels and chipmunks etc. are not as likely to spend time in his yard, and without the trees, his privacy has been extremely compromised. My client has not been spending time in his yard because he has not felt comfortable out there knowing that his neighbors can see everything he does. "They're just trees," said Stan, "and they bothered me for years. You are all bellowing for nothing." "I see that you have no remorse for the situation," said the judge, "and I will take that into account in my decision. I don't think that I need to take any extra time on this case. I'm going to give my verdict now. I've seen and heard everything I need to in order to make an informed decision. Thank you, Your Honor," said my lawyer. "We appreciate that these proceedings will not be delayed any further." "I order the accused to pay damages of $200,000 to the plaintiff," said the judge. "I don't have that kind of money," said Stan. "Well, perhaps you should have thought of the legal and moral ramifications of your actions prior to having the trees cut down. You will have to make arrangements for the payment. We will give you 60 days to make financial arrangements, and my office will be keeping an eye on the situation." "This is not right," said Stan. "They were just trees. There's no way they cost that much." "I have the report from the arborist in front of me," said the judge. "The trees had a significant value, and there are also additional damages which I had the right to award, and I did due to the circumstances surrounding this case." "I cannot believe this," said Stan. "You're trying to bankrupt me." "I will not have more of these outbursts," said the judge. "If they persist, then I will charge you with contempt of court. My ruling is being entered into the official court records by the county clerk. If the damages are not paid to the plaintiff through this office within the 60 days that have been mandated, there will be a warrant out for your arrest." "You would throw me in jail over trees," said Stan. "I warned you," said the judge. "Another outburst and I will fine you for being in contempt of court. You're all dismissed for today." We then left the judge's office and I headed home. I felt vindicated by the situation, but I knew that things were not finished yet either. I didn't know if Stan would pay me or if he would decide to play a martyr and go to jail instead. And that meant for the next 60 days I would need to wait to see if I would get paid the money for the trees. I wanted to install a fence between the properties and also plant some trees and do some further landscaping. I knew it would take time to get mature trees, but at least having some in the meantime would be better than my current situation. Well, just before the end of the 60 days, my lawyer presented me with a check. Stan had come up with the money begrudgingly. A few days after that, I noticed that he had put his home up for sale. I was hopeful that his home would sell, because it would be nice to not have a hostile neighbor living next to me. I got to work on my yard, and despite the fact that it would not be as majestic as it had been when I bought it, I was satisfied with the landscaping restoration that I was undertaking. I was doing what I could to make the best out of a bad situation. Justice had been served, and my entitled neighbor learned a very expensive lesson about property rights and tree laws. He was also not able to intimidate me to leave or back down, and I took that as an additional win. By the way, by the 1-year anniversary of me buying the property, things were looking a lot better. The smaller trees and bushes that I had purchased had gotten time to establish their roots and seemed much happier in my yard now. Stan had moved out about 4 months after putting up the for sale sign, and since he had left, my neighbors and I had been getting to know each other much better. It seemed that everyone had been afraid of Stan and had not really mixed much before, but now we were frequently planning neighborhood barbecues and get-togethers. I was glad of my decision to leave my old home and move onto my piece of land. My house was also being built and I couldn't wait to enjoy it. It was going to have a large wraparound porch on one side and a solarium on the other, so I would be able to appreciate nature inside or out whenever I wanted to. Either way, the next one is a revenge story. This happened around 2010. I was cycling around Haringey Green Lanes where I lived at the time. The area is gentrified now, but at the time it was considered to be a bit rough by London standards. Those familiar with the area know that there are narrow alleyways that connect up all the side roads off of Green Lanes. So I'm cycling past one of these alleyways and I see a group of rowdy kids messing around inside the alley. There are 4 of them, aged maybe 11 to 12, making a lot of noise as kids usually do. As I pass them, they all go quiet, sensing that something is up. I shoot them a look over my shoulder and catch one of them throwing a stone at me, which bounces off my back. This is followed by an explosion of laughter and jeering. Now, I remember being a kid and the length that kids go to entertain their friends. To be honest, I was not even that mad. But in that moment, I decided to make this a teachable moment for the little guy and to make sure that he will never forget me. So I pretend to lose my mind, I toss my bike to the road, turn and sprint at them full speed to quickly cover the 10 to 15 meters between us. At the same time, I scream in a pretend rage and wind my arm back like I'm about to deliver a WWE haymaker and end a young life or two. They barely have time to register what's going on. 3 of them scatter like cockroaches, but the one who threw the stone freezes in his tracks. He kind of just collapses against a wall with his arms outstretched, babbling and begging for mercy. I put my face right next to his and whisper, "I'm only joking, kid." The kid blinks for a second and then promptly starts to wail loudly, like he's carrying the burden of the world on his little shoulders. I walked away feeling like I'd done the world a small service. And the next one is the story of someone getting revenge on a bully. So here in Asia, there's a concept of ragging in colleges. It's a form of hazing done by seniors on newcomers. People defend it by saying it's supposed to break the ice, but it's nothing but a form of humiliation and mental torture, if not physical. Laws are trying to clamp it down, but the practice is still so widespread, it's pretty much expected once you enter college life. It happened to me in college, and of all the things, the most humiliating part was them forcing me to dance in a lewd way. Was over in seconds, but the memory was just burning in my head for days and I could not get rid of it. I already knew from my college history that reporting to them directly does not do jack, though ragging is strictly banned. Well, the government had made portals and helplines to report these things. That resource seemed untapped to me, so I officially filed a complaint and did my best to move on with my life. 10 years later, yep, I came to know the police want to talk to me to close the case. I'd forgotten about the whole thing, but now that something was happening, I was not willing to just drop it. So they made it to an official charge against the 4 perpetrators. Turns out the boys were all working abroad, so am I, and got scared out of their minds on realizing that there's an official charge against them. Working abroad requires visas and all renewal forms have questions like, have you ever been charged? Doesn't matter if you were found innocent or guilty, you have to tick it yes or no. For countries with high immigration rates, that's a potential death sentence on your visas. Renewals can get rejected even if you have a solid explanation. One of the boys found and contacted me via social media begging me to take my complaint back. Offered me money, too bad for him, I'm well-to-do. I informed this to the police in charge and he is now in an even deeper hole. As for me, seeing some semblance of justice was really cathartic and helped me actually feel instead of forgetting about it. And before we end the video, we will read one last story from r/petty revenge. It is titled Condescending Colleague, I Cost Him His Desired Job. So I work in administration in a private school. Some years ago we had a new history teacher straight out of university who thought he was the universe's gift to education, and because I worked in admin, I was a lower form of life for him. He was condescending and quite often just plain rude. Well, a few years later he had moved schools, my boss was out of office, so I picked up a call for him and was asked if he could give a reference for a former teacher who had applied to one of our city's most prestigious boys' schools. I asked who the reference was for so I could give my boss a heads up, and oh joy, it was the unpleasant ex-colleague. Before I could stop myself, I started to laugh. The very nice deputy head on the line asked me why. I told him I was prejudiced because of the way he treated me, but also said that the history marks the year he taught at our school were the worst they had ever been. My boss came back later and phoned this man, and when asked if he would re-employ said person, he said definitely not. The boss and I shared a good laugh about that one. And yeah guys, thank you for watching, I will see you again tomorrow.